One of the things I've discovered through my studies of human history over the last millennia and beyond that is that social innovation is just as important as technological innovation in human history. We often think about innovation being things like the spinning jenny and the steam engine, the iPhone, but actually, I believe that humans are social innovators, that some of the great developments in human history have been in people coming together and innovating in terms of collective action, human organization, social movements, shared values, creating invisible realms like the public sphere. So I think it's worth thinking about how social innovations have helped shape history. And I want to just give one example of how social innovation can help us deal with one specific problem that we are facing this century, a problem which will get worse and worse, which is the global water crisis. Now, if you ever want to look at scary statistics, have a look at these two graphs. One of them shows predicted water stress or water scarcity by 2050. And as you can see in those red areas, this is going to be affecting sub-Saharan, across Africa, the Middle East, parts of the United States, but also Southern Europe as well, right across the central swathes of the world. Of every 10,000 drops of water on the planet, only one of them is easily accessible fresh water. The rest is seawater. So that's one scary graphic. Another one is if you look at the increase in the number of conflicts over water, both within and between countries, which have been exponentially going up since the year 2000. The former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan once said that if we're not careful, future wars are going to be about water and not about oil. I think he's right. So there's a question there of how we deal with the impending water crisis, which already exists in some countries but will get worse over the coming years and over the coming decades. Now, the classic solution are very top-down solutions, like in China, where they sort of build a gigantic dam. But what I've seen in history being really effective and important are grassroots social innovations around water. And I'd like to tell you about one of them. Let me introduce you to the Tribunal of Waters, the Tribunal de las Aguas. This is a water court which exists in the Spanish city of Valencia. It's probably the oldest legal institution in Europe. And the amazing thing about the Tribunal of Waters, the Water Court of Valencia, it has been meeting every Thursday at 12 noon outside the west door of the cathedral in the city of Valencia. The same place every single week. And what it does is that out come, when the bell gongs at 12 o'clock, these 8 black-cloaked figures. And these are the democratically elected members of the tribunal. And they are local farmers who've been elected by the tens of thousands of farmers in Valencia's great agricultural hinterland, where Europeans get their juicy Valencia oranges. And what happens at 12 noon every Thursday is that there is a public hearing where, for example, if there's been a farmer who's used more than their fair share of water or hasn't been looking after their irrigation canals, which are used to spread the water evenly around Valencia, they might get fined in this public hearing. And you can go along as a tourist. I've been there and seen the water court in action. And the other amazing thing about this water court is that it's been meeting not just at the same place at the same time outside the West Door Cathedral, but it's been meeting there for hundreds and hundreds of years. You can see paintings from the 18th and 19th century where the water court is meeting exactly there outside the doors of the cathedral. In fact, some people say that the water court goes back to the period of Al-Andalus, before the reconquest of Islamic Spain by Christian forces in the 13th century. A lot of the words that are used for water in Spain or for a weir actually come from Arabic. So this is a very long and old piece of living history. So if ever you bite into a juicy Valencia orange, remember you're benefiting from hundreds of years of democratic water history. And someone who found the Valencia Water Tribunal really interesting was Elinor Ostrom, who famously won a Nobel Prize for Economics for her work on what's known as the commons. Now, the idea of the commons, or what's sometimes called common pool resources, refers to the way that human societies, many of them over the centuries, have developed ways of sustainably managing their resources, their water, their fisheries, their forests as well. And they've done it without relying on the state and without relying on the market, but have done it by creating collective agreements amongst local groups, just like the Tribunal of Waters have done. For example, creating rules where you might get fined for violating the rules of that particular resource management area. And what Eleanor Ostrom did is that she studied lots of examples like the Tribunal of Waters in Valencia, or fishery management in West Africa, or forestry management in parts of Switzerland, and noticed that there were similar kinds of rules to make a commons system operate effectively. So what she was basically saying was that she was challenging an idea sometimes called the tragedy of the commons, the idea that human beings will naturally overuse resources, that we will run down our ecological resources, we will overfish, we will chop down all the trees. No, we don't. We sometimes manage to do it very effectively. And that's why she said this. She said, there is no reason to believe that bureaucrats and politicians, no matter how well-meaning, are better at solving problems than the people on the spot who have the strongest incentive to get the solutions right. What she was saying was that examples like Valencia's water court is an example of social innovation. And that's what I mean. This is one of the great hopes in history, that we can innovate in ways to manage our resources, help us overcome ecological crises. We can take a model like the Valencia Tribunal and say, well, why don't we try and scale this up? In fact, this has been done. Latin America has a whole regional tribunal of waters, which holds public hearings, which tries to hold to account, for example, American corporations which are trying to build dams on the lands of indigenous people. Or in the UK, where I live, we have this kind of horrendous water situation where local water is being controlled by private monopolies. Private companies control our water. And I've been trying to argue publicly that why don't we draw on the lessons of the Valencia Water Tribunal to say, why don't we have local community management of our water? Or why don't these private water companies at least have community stakeholders as part of them? Let's manage our water as a commons. Let's learn from history. And this is one of the ways that history can help us on the pathway to becoming good ancestors.